Yeah, well, I read his book when I was at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, when I was 19, and then when I graduated from Lincoln that year, uh, I had applied to Harvard Business School, got turned down, and I was leafing through a catalog at the University of, then the University of Omaha, and all of a sudden I saw these names, Graham and Dodd. Now, I read the book, but I had no idea that those guys were teaching. So I wrote Dave Dodd, who was an associate dean, and I said, "Dear Dean Dodd," this was in August. I said, I know this is a little late, but I said, I thought you guys were dead. And I said, now that I know you're alive, I would love to come back and study under you. And I got a letter back from him right away, and he said, you're admitted. So that was middle of August or so, and I went back there, and here I had my two heroes teaching, and that was the reason I ended up at Columbia. Well, Ben was running Graham Newman Corp, and I had gotten just a little bit familiar with that after reading The Intelligent Investor. But I didn't know much about these fellows except that they were legendary. And I immediately, in the first, well, I was only there 1 year, but in the first semester, I was in Dave Dodd's class, which was a pretty good sized class. And then Ben taught the seminar class in the second session. And Ben would drive up from Wall Street. I think maybe his wife Esther would drive him. And he came up, I believe, on Thursday afternoons. And we had a relatively small class. I don't think there were more than 20 people in it. And a number of them were not Columbia students. And then, that was my dream class. And I had nothing but fun from that point on and learned a lot. And Ben was this incredible teacher. I mean, he was a natural. And I've done some teaching later on. I've actually tried to pattern some of the methods I use after what Ben did. He drew us all in, and I met some wonderful friends there that became friends for life too. It was I got my money's worth. Well, he liked to play games, and so he would put up a company A and B and give us a lot of figures on it, and then ask us what we thought about company A and B. And often they would be the same company at different points in time. Or he had a lot of ways of making points in a that were memorable, just because of his style. It was clear that he enjoyed teaching, and it was clear that he liked having fun with us, but he was telling us, we were learning a lot. Well, he would always be drawing you out, and that's why he would play these games with companies, and we would sometimes we wouldn't know where he was going sometimes, and then it was kind of like an O. Henry story. There was always a surprise at the end, and he used current examples too, which very few professors do, and that makes it more interesting. Well, he was a practitioner, and he was using current examples. I mean, it was like learning baseball from a fellow who was batting 400. Well, they didn't. I don't think they really appreciate most of them. I mean, because very few took the class. I can't tell you the numbers, but if I had to guess, of the 20 or so in the class, probably 10 were from outside, including my friend Bill Rowan, got to be a lifelong friend of mine. I think Tom Knapp was in the class, and he became a lifelong friend. I think there was one fellow, I can't remember his name, that may have been in his 50s. So there were relatively few students in the class. No, he was approachable. He liked teaching. So if the class ended and you wanted to ask him some questions so he could keep teaching, he was and Dave Dodd was the same way, I should add. They were both extremely kind men. Now, I mean, Dave would take me out for dinner. He treated me like a son, basically, and we became friends for the rest of his life. And he had me take care of his daughter and a lot of things. Ben was very friendly, but you couldn't get as close to him. He would always want to do things for you. He didn't really expect you or want you to do things for him. We used the Graham and Dodd textbook in Dodd's class. We did not have a textbook in Ben's class, but he did assign I think each student had a project that they took on, but then he let us do that on our own pretty much. Well, I remember some of the examples he would use, like, he would use an aircraft company, and it wasn't that long after World War II, and he would show how companies were transformed, and he would show how markets didn't appreciate certain things or overappreciated other things.
Right.
Everything was example. I mean, he was not talking at you; he was talking with you.
Yeah.
No, he would do that some in his writings, but I don't remember it specifically in the classroom. He used puns and things of that sort. I mean, it was a joy to hear him talk. He brought Walter Schloss along as just as an assistant, and Walter and I became friends because of that class. And one day in the class, Walter invited me to lunch, and I thought I'd struck gold. In terms of the class, we didn't get into personalities at all. He de-emphasized management, both in his. He said it was important, but it was sort of unknowable, and so he did not talk about individuals that I remember at all. Oh, I think he had great confidence in his ideas. I mean, he'd been thinking about the subject for a very long time, and really there wasn't any other intellect in Wall Street that was close to his. And incidentally, if you talk to Dave Dodd, Dave always gave all the credit to Ben on the security analysis book. And Dave was a very sweet guy, and he did a lot of the work for Ben in terms of the examples and all that. But he was the first to say that the ideas were all Ben's. Well, I made a pest of myself. I wanted to go to work for him, and he gave me an A+ in the course, but he turned me down on going to work. They only had about 5 people in their office, and bear in mind, I got my graduate degree when I was 20, so I was a pretty young kid, and so I came out to Omaha and started selling securities, but I kept trying to propose myself in various ways, and one way was to send him ideas about stocks I might buy for Graham Newman Corp as a broker, and he gave me 1 or 2 little orders that were kind of hard to fill, but at least he was paying attention, and then he twice at least he came up with offers of jobs. One time from Arnold Bernhard at Value Line, another time from William Rosenwald at American Securities. I mean, he twice said he was talking me up to other people. He didn't have any need apparently at Graham Newman for me, and I even thought about taking one of the jobs, but I really wanted to work for him. And then about 3 years after I got out of school, I got this letter from him, said, next time you're in New York, come see me. So I made sure I was in New York about 24 hours later, and he offered me a job. Well, it changed my life. If I hadn't read that book in late 1949, I'd have had a different future. It instantly clicked with me that what he was saying made sense, and then the chance to study under him, and under Dave Dodd too. It was a different experience, but it was hugely helpful. It shaped my professional life. There's no question about it. Working for him was a sort of different experience because Walter and I were in a little office. Ben was in another office. It was a tiny firm, 5 or so people, and almost anything that we knew what he was looking for, and so almost anything Walter and I would come up with, he would tell us go buy it, but he also did it in very small amounts. I was much more inclined to, if I found something good, to load up on it, and Ben was not that, he was really not that interested when we were at Graham Newman. I mean, I didn't know it then, but he was getting close to retiring. Making money did not motivate him, and he had all the money he needed. And I remember one time I was standing with him by the elevator. We were going down to eat at the cafeteria in the bottom of the Shannon building, and he said, "You still remember it?" He said, "Warren," he said, don't worry too much about making money." He says, it won't change the way you live. He says, it'll change the way your wife lives. But he said, our wives live differently. But he says, look, you and I are wearing the same clothes, we're going to eat in the same cafeteria, so relax. Ben actually, when I was working for him, Scarsdale Adult School wanted Ben to teach a course, a night course, and at Scarsdale High School, and Ben said, "Why don't you do this, Warren?" So I went up and taught a class for 8 or 10 weeks, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Well, it wasn't what's going on in the market that week. It was looking at businesses, and maybe he may have worked in some other arbitrage type situation, but it was all practical advice about current situations, and as we worked through those, you would presumably learn how to think about securities. Ben was always thinking, by the time at least I knew him, as a passive investor, that you bought a little of everything. So he was widely diversified, which is not a style that I would go for, and he really he wasn't driven toward maximizing performance. Now, bear in mind, this was the last year or two of his professional investment management career, so it may have been different earlier on. But he would never get excited about an idea, but he would never throw cold water on it either. I would get excited, and he always felt that we shouldn't go out and talk to managements about the business because he felt that his books were out there for people all over the country who would not have that opportunity. So he felt we ought to achieve our results in a way similar to what somebody who read the book could achieve them, and that we might be cheating a little if we worked a lot harder than that. I would have loved to go out more and see management. So it was almost like we were running the fund as a few people who had read the book and who did not have the opportunity even to go visit managements. So the place was a little more passive and slower than I might have liked, and but I was well, by that time I was 23 or 24, but I was eager for a little more action. Well, like I say, he would put a little money in almost anything that I came up with, and he was not looking at all for the great business. He was looking for really mediocre to a little bit better than that businesses that were selling very cheap, and it worked very well. And of course, the irony is that the shareholders of Graham Newman made more money out of GEICO, which was then called Government Employees Insurance, which was the antithesis of the kind of company he normally would invest in. Well, I learned a lot of things about techniques of teaching, but Ben was this combination of being a wonderful friend to everybody, but always somewhat distant. I mean, he did not want to sit around a table and just shoot the ball or anything of that sort. It was not his style. So he would do things for you. My first son was born when I was working for him, and that we named him Howard Graham Buffett after my dad and after Ben. And Ben came over, and Esty, his wife, and they had a movie projector, a camera. I mean, fairly expensive type. And he would always be doing that for you. And he didn't want anything in return. He actually, on his birthdays, he would give gifts to the people that attended the birthday party because he figured he was the happy one. My wife mentioned that I wasn't really too enthusiastic about dancing, and the next morning I found on my desk at Graham Newman a gift certificate to the White Plains Arthur Murray studio.
That's great. Did you go?
I didn't go, and then he asked me a few weeks later, he said, they tell me at Arthur Murray's that you haven't been there. Well, you did get the feeling when you were with him that he was a man who he was a kind man. He said every day he wanted to do something, foolish, something creative, and something generous. And believe me, he did things generous every day. He did not need to be coming up to Columbia on Thursday afternoons for 20 or so students, many of whom probably didn't really even appreciate what they were getting, but he did it for decades, and he expected absolutely nothing in return. I mean, I saw that time after time in terms of what he did. He really he wanted to treat other people better than he expected them to treat him.